Welcome to Upcertain TV. I'm Gemma Houghton. Today I'm here with Bill Hunt to discuss international search and what makes it different from just search. So hi Bill, thanks for being here.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So this is a topic that obviously is very relevant to both of us. Something we talk about a lot is international search, and the question often comes up, well, international search is just the same as search but in lots of languages. But there's more to it than that. So what do you think are the real differences that set it apart?
Yeah, I think there's four major things, because you're exactly right. If I'm in Spain and I'm trying to optimize my site for the Spanish market, those techniques in of themselves are no different than doing it in the US or in the UK or Australia or Japan. It's exactly the same. Where we run into complexities are those things that make international search. Number one being language. As we go market to market, there are language nuances, obviously. So somebody who correctly creates a site and localizes it for, say, Spain, and then adapts it, or localizes it specifically for, say, Peru or Argentina, you reduce the first barrier of using the incorrect word.
Yeah.
And we see that a lot. A word that's used here may not necessarily be used there. So that's our really first thing, and it's just like doing keyword research for an individual market. The second piece we want to think about is, can we leverage any of those assets across multiple markets? Germany is a good example. So Swiss German, Germany German, and Austrian German, there's some similarities. It's all German, obviously, to a non-German speaker. But within that, there are words that you can use. So that's an operational, which is our fourth problem, which we'll cover sort of, I guess, now. Operational is where we're looking at things still individually, but we should look holistically. So like that, can we get any scale out of our German language content across multiple markets? Can we look at a set of words across multiple markets? It's very interesting. In my role, I get to go all over the world, and I'll be a meeting in Japan and somebody would be talking about a phrase or content that's doing really well, and the first thing the global team will ask is, well, what is that? Hoping that they could take that idea and that popularity and spin it out somewhere else. So the operational things, a big pet peeve of mine with operations is people will often do site audits in every single market. But the interesting thing is they're using a template-driven website. And the first thing they deduce when they look at all these audits is, we have the same problem everywhere. Well, of course, it's the same template. So can we, do a template-level audit and then use that budget we would have spent to look at the same thing in different market around links, keywords, those things that are truly unique in that market. So it creates a level of efficiency. So going back, so we had linguistic problems or language challenges which are unique across multiple languages. Number two, tied to that is geo-targeting. We, for various business reasons, somebody comes from Russia, we try to send them to a Russian site. Makes sense, but what happens when when Google comes or Yandex happens to crawl from the US? What happens to that? So that's the big thing, is we try to artificially move people where we think they should logically go. And in doing that, we often send robots, the bots from the spiders, to the wrong place. So one common problem we see a lot now is people are using, because of GDPR and other reasons, people are putting the cookie, this site uses cookies. It's interesting how many large companies, their snippet says this site uses cookies, and so essentially that statement is their site description now. In doing that, they've also, once you accept the cookie, commit you to that country or language version. Well, two things, these search engines can't commit to a cookie statement. So sometimes that's blocking the spider from getting in. Two, the IP detection says, oh, you came from the United States. And don't say, oh, it's Googlebot from the United States trying to go to my German site. So they, instead of sending them to the German site, we send them back to the US, meaning Germany may never get indexed. So that's that second problem with geo-targeting. And the third is the fundamental infrastructure. If you have 5 cloned versions of your UK site, Google specifically may look at them as duplicates and not index that content in Australia. So the indexing thing is a big problem because we see a lot of people. An example I saw was a company, they had built a site for a language version for the Northern Marianas Islands, 50,000 people, but they had 6 language versions for that website. They speak predominantly English, but yet there was 3 versions of Chinese, a Japanese, French, German, and Italian. It's like, I don't know if how many people, and not even people on holiday, are going to buy this product for that. So that's one of these other complications. The net effect of that was they had produced 5 million additional pages that created an overhead from a crawling standpoint. The last one is just how it's all connected. We've had these discussions in the past about CCTLDs, that infrastructure, how we structure that, how we create country language. We've seen 187 different combinations of how people designate a country or a language using URL structure or domains. That's insane. That wouldn't happen anywhere else. In one company.
Yeah.
There's one that has 22 different combinations for just their home pages alone. And so that's a technical barrier because it can't use signals correctly to figure out what is what. So in an individual market, it's fine. You call it whatever you want it, it works there, but if you start to look at this holistically, it creates problems and challenges. So I think really those are the 4 big ones, the language issues, geo-targeting issues, CMS issues. Can your CMS properly handle the language? When you get into sort of right to left, with Arabic and Hebrew and things like that, you start to run into some pretty interesting challenges. And then lastly is operationally. Trying to get reports from 30 different agencies and roll them up into one uniform format is a big challenge.
So there's 2 different elements to this in terms of where people are with the international journey, because you get some businesses that are purely, maybe for now, US based and have only been in the US, but they're now looking to expand internationally. And they haven't really prepared for that in the first place.
Right.
So their CMS isn't really suitable for taking on new languages. They haven't thought about buying domains in other markets or about how they would call their products or anything like that. And then there's the ones that are already quite international but have a bit of a mess.
Right.
And I guess it's the challenge is for the first lot is how do they know from the starting point? How do they build that into the expansion plan? From a search point of view, how do they get people within the business who aren't maybe SEO savvy to understand why that's so important?
Right. I think, one is fight for consistency as a startup. And what's nice now is many people will spin out often another language version, not necessarily a country language version, or they'll spin out, most people in America would go after Canada or the UK because it's English. And that's where I would start. I would also look at who do you want to emulate. Now, being big and because eBay does this like maybe you want to do, doesn't mean they're necessarily right. But look at what some of the bigger players actually are doing and do that. But even for a small site starting out, think about how you handle people internationally. I think you made a great point of may not be ready. It's not just can your website attract people, but what happens if they send you an email in French because you spun out a French version because you use Google Translate to do it, and you start getting all these email in French? How will you handle that? So the same sort of operational logistic things you have to think about in a real world, we got to think about here. I would say stay consistent. Commit to either top-level domains, commit to a folder structure. If you're just going to use /country, think about, do you plan to go to Belgium or Switzerland? If you're going to go to Belgium or Switzerland, now you've got CH, but you have to account for multiple languages.
Yeah, so it is a challenge. It is very complex, and it is. But obviously, the advantages of doing it and doing it well are huge.
Exactly.
And from the perspective of the really big global organizations, often their challenge is that they've got big teams in different markets who are all
Right.
kind of responsible for their own market SEO, but then you've got a global team as well, and that's where your operational challenges really come in, because you have people with different agendas or different ways of wanting
Right.
to do it and different ways of working. How can and should that be streamlined? How can
Right.
scale be achieved without, treading on people's toes, I guess, and without
Right.
damaging local expertise as well?
I mean, you nailed the problem exactly, is that different people have, and different markets have different objectives and different KPIs.
Yeah.
And people solve for those. Easiest thing I've ever done is create an always-on scorecard. And if you sell a widget, and that widget, is 2 or 3 ways we want to address the widget. Number one, is there a name of the widget? Is it Acme Blue Widget? Then that needs to be on the list in every market that sells the Acme Blue Widget. Then the second is, how people that don't know Acme has such widget, how might they search for it? And we have that. I'll give you a great example from Absolute Vodka. So in every market, we have 4 sets of words and if you've got 17 products in your market, you take that 17 set of words. Number 1 is about vodka. So vodka, premium vodka, ultra premium vodka. The next thing, we have flavors. So if it's in France, we've got the French equivalent of lemon vodka or lemon flavored vodka. In each market, there is a local language equivalent. The third are the product names, obviously. And then lastly are recipes related to these core products. There's a set of recipes that every market has that they need to perform well for. The nice thing about having this consistency, it doesn't matter if it's French, German, or Japanese, it's the count of numbers. If there's 14 products, or if we just go to lemon vodka, there's about 8 words that we care about. It doesn't matter the language, we're looking at the count of 8. So if you got 8 and all 8 are ranking number 1, then you get full marks. Everything's good. If you only have 1 ranking and 7 don't, we know that we have a problem in that market. So it levels the playing field for everyone, because there's almost no way for a market to argue against these words. Now the 5th bucket is the bonus words, whatever you want, whatever campaign words, and you're responsible for them. But at a global level, we're saying, we sell blue widgets, this is how people look for blue widgets, give us your local language variation of it here, and you need to perform. And by calling them always on, we start with that. And then once your next level down are variations. Because as long as we're covered for the mission critical words, we can measure that, we can monitor that, and we can get consistency across markets.
So it's using the benefit of both, really. It's having the global overview and the global expertise perhaps, but also then tapping in and letting the individual markets also have some autonomy and add some value to that.
And I mean, one of the things that some of the companies that I've worked with they use this as like that, what is it, the reward or the stick methodology. The global level can now measure that because they have that set of words for each market. They can build a report, and you can use, we've called it change through embarrassment. You have a meeting and say, okay, India, or okay, France, you don't have a lot of words performing, why don't you? And if their response is, well, we're focused on other things, that means you don't care about the core brand. And they almost can't wiggle out of that. So it is a way to get local consensus using sort of the power at the top to force that. And then the local markets like it because, see, mom, dad, I'm doing well, I've got full marks. And so it's a great way on both sides to motivate them to do it.
And then finally, what do you think are some of the best resources? What are the best ways for people to really keep up to date with what's happening on the international side and to learn more about it if they're not sure, and maybe get some advice on, how they can implement things better?
Yeah, I think obviously, Web Certain is the, premier place to get that type of information. I think, the amazing speakers that come to International Search Summit, these are all people that have done this at various size businesses. I think in terms of an event, it's probably the single best event for that depth of information. There's starting to be more. Some of the other search engine journal has got a series of articles now of people writing about some of these topics. And then, the other is just starting to winnow out what seems to be true or not. Google does try to give a lot of information related to this. So I know Google's not everywhere. Yandex does. They've got a really good blog where they talk about those things that are unique to Yandex. Not a lot in English related to Baidu or Naver. Again, but some of the web certain writers definitely capture that. So those would be the places that I would suggest people go to.
Great. Well, thank you for that, and thanks for sharing your insights as always.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.